Hello, good afternoon. We are going to get started. This is an announcement to let you know you are in energy financing hiding in plain sight. If that's not where you intended to be, this is your chance to escape, but you might want to stay. I think it's going to be a good session. My name is Madeline McElaney. I'm in real estate. I have my real estate license. I also serve as a director on the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association Board, and then was on the New Hampshire Electric Cooperative Board of Directors for the past 4 years, recently ended my term there. And years ago, I had the privilege of being the very first employee of New Hampshire Sustainable Energy Association, which you now know as Clean Energy New Hampshire. And Chris Skoglund reminded me that in 2009, we formed a group, the Local Energy Working Group, LUG, for lack of a better acronym, and held the first Local Energy Solutions Conference. And so it's such a privilege and an honor to be here today and see how this conference has grown in sophistication, attendees, all of that. And honestly, I believe that this session is really what it's all about. We're here to hear some stories from people in different roles in the local energy world, and we're here to learn from them. It's not necessarily about titles or years of service, because I think everybody has something unique to contribute to. And I mean, this is really just about sharing our successes together and forming connections so that when you have a question, you might be able to reach out to someone who's had that same question and tried some answers before. The speakers sitting to my right, Mike Davey from Energy Efficiency Investments, Karen Rantamaki from the New Hampshire Department of Administrative Services, Doria Brown from the City of Nashua, Susan Peters from the town of Dublin. I'll give them some time to speak. If you could wait until they're through their slides and then ask questions. If you want to ask, like if Mike gives his slides and then you have a question for Mike, we'll take questions as we go. And then we'll try to leave some time for questions at the end of the session. And a little bit of background, this session, I've been told, is the brainchild of Chris Skoglund and Mike Davey. And the hope today is that you come away with a few things. First of all, that federal financing and the New Hampshire SAVE program, those are not your only options. There are other creative solutions for financing your municipal energy projects, and we're here to talk about those. There are plenty of other sessions that focus on the federal programs and the New Hampshire SAVES programs, and we hope to offer you some other solutions that you can layer in and maximize your return on investments. There's been a lot of talk about federal funding, and there's a lot of federal funding coming, but it's really not as much as we need, not as much as the appetite and the demand in our communities. The only other thing I had in my notes was I'm reading the Overstory right now and really enjoying reading it. And there was a quote in that book: "The best arguments in the world won't change a person's mind. The only thing that can do that is a good story." So we're here to share some good stories.
All right. I think I'm first, and this is how we toggle the slide. So I'm Mike Davey with Energy Efficient Investments, and I was going to start by saying how long I've been there and what my title was, but Madeline just said that doesn't matter. But I've been there for 13 years working on energy efficiency projects and construction projects across the state of New Hampshire. Our office is located in Merrimack, and we are typically working with commercial businesses, municipalities, schools, and institutional customers. And one of the things that we hear from time to time is, oh, we'd really like to upgrade the heating plant, or the controls are obsolete, or we'd really like to get off of oil, but we don't have the budget for it. We're going to try and put it in a couple of years' budget. What our company does, we started out doing energy audits and trying to find savings within operations, sometimes through energy efficiency, sometimes through maintenance reductions, and sometimes we've even looked at consolidating buildings to have some savings. And then we can use those savings in fuel cost and in maintenance to help finance energy efficiency projects over long term. And this is a tool that municipalities, schools, universities in the state of New Hampshire have used very successfully over the last 15 years since I've been doing this. And one of the things that what I've found is New Hampshire is very small community engagement, and it's really easy for one person to push their municipality or their school to do these types of projects. It's usually not school superintendents or mayors that think of this idea. A lot of times it's the local energy committees. One example is the town of Ringe and Jaffrey. They have schools that needed all types of equipment, and their local energy committees kept pushing the schools, hey, look at alternative things, and they finally put out an RFP. They selected us, and we put in a local wood chip heating system that got them off oil and paid for itself with energy savings, and then upgraded their entire HVAC system. And that was really energy committee driven. So I think sometimes energy committees get discouraged because, we were created, we have no budget, we have no real mandate other than our voice. And that voice, when directed the right way and using some of these tools, can really make a difference. One thing that's unique about performance contracting is the savings are typically guaranteed. So it's one of the scenarios where if an energy audit's done, if items that save energy are found, companies like ours will guarantee those energy savings, and so those savings can be used to finance the improvements over time. There are several organizations that will lease or bond the HVAC equipment, and we assist in doing that, and we also measure and verify the savings. So every year we give a report card on how well the projects are doing. Most municipalities and schools use lease funding to do this type of work. There was a legislative bill that tried to restrict that. I think it made it all the way to the governor's desk, and he vetoed it. And thankfully, however, I think the reason that bill came up is a lease finance requires a simple majority, and a bond requires usually a 3/5 majority. So I spent my last 4 months working almost exclusively in legislative things. Failed at the House and the Senate, but Governor Sununu came through and vetoed that bill. Some of the things that we focus on are energy and operational savings, finding financing, engineering, and measurement and verification. This is the budget from pre-COVID for the city of Manchester. I know that's bigger than most of our municipalities, but it's my hometown. So before they were doing performance contracting, the school district was spending $3.5 million per year on heating, lighting, and cooling the schools. Through performance contracting, through energy efficiency, we were able to get them under $2 million per year, and that was direct savings to myself as a taxpayer. And this was through, Mayor Gatzis's, so we had to get through conservative government and convince them that, hey, this pays for itself, there's opportunities for savings. 18 and beyond is going to be harder because they started reducing schools and they started adding air conditioning to the schools, so it's going to be a little bit harder to show this graph going forward. But that's a little bit of a backward-looking success story in significant energy savings right here in Manchester. And one thing that, when I started in this industry, we were doing a lot of geothermal. And geothermal start, in fact, the state liquor store, I was reminded that, and if you ever have a reason to go to the state liquor store in Nashua at Exit 6, we put in a geothermal system there. I think 15 years ago we were just reminiscing. That's when we met, yeah. And that's, as far as I know, still up and running. And what happened right around that time is natural gas prices started really plummeting, probably because of the fracking in Pennsylvania, and geothermal became less and less attractive. The Inflation Reduction Act will pay up to 40% of the installation of geothermal. And in places like, this is in Massachusetts, where we just broke ground on a geothermal project at a vocational school in Danvers, where we're trying to get off of fossil fuels, getting that 40% rebate from the federal government really helps make geothermal viable again with the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed a few years ago. HB 1187 was the bill that I talked about that would really have negatively impacted us, and it would have required a 2/3 or 3/5 vote on any projects. It would have completely decimated our industry. Thankfully, this Clean Energy New Hampshire and Governor Sununu worked a little bit together, which isn't always the same pair, to veto this bill. So that's something that we're hoping doesn't come back again, but we spent a lot of time on. So I think I'm going to hand it off to Karen unless there's any questions on those.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. As you can see, I'm Karen Rantamaki. I work for the Division of Plant and Property at the Department of Administrative Services. I served as the state energy manager for about 8.5 years, working on various energy efficiency initiatives across all state buildings, and I now, serve in a similar role, but don't get to work on energy every day like I used to. So I was going to talk a little bit today about what New Hampshire has been able to do in terms of creative financing for various projects. So starting, when I started as the energy manager in 2008, legislation had just passed that allowed us to participate in demand response programs and to reinvest the revenue that we earned through those programs into state energy efficiency projects. So we got that up and running, and I looked back recently, and over the 5 years that we participated in those programs, we earned about $200,000, and we reinvested that money into projects in state government. Now, that sounds like a small amount of money in today's dollars. Back then, it was actually a pretty big deal. We were trying to get energy efficiency programs kind of running in the state. We had very minimal funding, so every little bit of money that we could bring in and reinvest was really helpful. Over time, the DR revenue kind of dried up. The programs became more and more restrictive in terms of how you could earn revenue. If you were using an emergency generator, it had to be super clean, and we didn't have the money to reinvest into putting all new infrastructure. So we looked at other ways that we could earn revenue for the state, and other ways that we would be able to keep that revenue in the state energy efficiency programs. So we wrote some legislation that would change the program that allowed just for that demand response revenue to be reinvested, and also to allow utility rebates, any rebates we got on renewable energy projects through the PUC, any revenue that we received through selling renewable energy certificates, and made it so that we could be allowed to reinvest all of those funds into various energy efficiency projects. Hold on, my notes just closed on me here. So currently, the state participates in all those various things. We also do group net metering with a couple of hydro facilities located in the state where we also capture some revenue, and that revenue also gets deposited into that state energy investment fund. Fast forward a few years to 2020, and we amended that legislation even further. The state, as Mike mentioned, also does ESPC projects, and we wanted to find a way for the agencies to retain those savings that they achieved through any energy reducing projects that they did. Because right now, or at the time, what would happen is the agency would reduce their energy use. They would therefore require less funding for utilities, and then the next year their budget would just be cut back to whatever that level was. So how could we find a way for the agencies to receive some of that benefit? And what we did was we modified the language, and we said at the end of the biennium, so the 2-year budget cycle, if there were funds remaining in an agency's utility line, and those funds had come from state funds, so it's not a federal grant or any federal funding, that we would allow that agency to retain 50% of whatever that remainder is. So if they saved over the course of the 2 years $100,000 on utilities, then $50,000 of that would get deposited into the State Energy Investment Fund and then be available for them to use in future years for more projects. So that's, I think, pretty much covers the State Energy Investment Fund. I do have another slide that talks about the history of energy-saving performance contracting in state government. So my tenure kind of starts about 2/3 of the way down this chart. So there was a bunch of projects done before I came on board as the state energy manager, and then we had a period of kind of dormancy. But starting in 2013, we kind of reinvigorated that program, and we've done 5 major projects since then, starting with the Administrative Services Hazen Drive project and going down from there. So a project at Cannon Mountain. When Concord Steam closed in Concord, we did 28 buildings. We then did a multi-agency Seacoast ESPC project, and then most recently we just finished up the last kind of 8 buildings in Concord that hadn't been touched, and we did an ESPC there. And we're looking forward to doing, hopefully in the coming months here, starting up another ESPC project. So thank you.
I'm going to use this microphone. Can you hear me? Yeah? All right. Hi, I am Doria Brown, and I work for the City of Nashua as their energy manager. And today I'm going to talk to you about our community power program and how it's now evolving to help us finance some interesting programs. So I'm first going to tell you a little bit about how community power works, even though I know all of you are probably experts at this point because we have a panel about community power every single year. But just in case, Nashua Community Power purchases electricity from sources that you choose. Eversource delivers the electricity using the same power line infrastructure and billing mechanisms. And Nashua Energy customers save money and have the power to choose new rates and products and how much electricity comes from renewable energy resources. So we've taken this program, and I'm actually going to skip that slide. And we have moved forward in 2023, and this is our current rate structure. So we have a granite basic rate, which is 8.6 cents a kilowatt hour. The Nashua Community Benefit rate, which is our default rate, is 8.8 cents a kilowatt hour. And then we have opt-ups to renewable energy, which are 9.3 cents, 10 cents, and 12 cents a kilowatt hour. But today, I'm going to hone in on the Nashua Community Benefit rate, which is our default supply rate. That rate includes a 0.2% adder that goes directly into something called discretionary reserves for Nashua Community Power. And this 0.2% adder adds about $1 to every electric bill per month, which doesn't seem like a lot of money, but we'll talk about what the impact is in a little bit. So here I have the revenue report for Nashua Community Power since launch. Have you guys ever seen the actual numbers from a community power program?
No.
Well, here they are. We launched in 2023. Our total revenue is $34,439,000. Our total cost or overhead is $29,169,000. We have $5.2 million in discretionary reserves, and we have $30,000 right now in discretionary reserves since adding our 0.2% adder in August. Our customer savings is $5.4 million, and community benefit, which is customer savings plus reserves, is about $10.7 million. Our total energy served in megawatt hours is 316,074 megawatt hours. So this is what the numbers coming from a community power program would look like after about a year and a half for a large community like the city of Nashua. So our opt-out report looks like this. Currently, we have 31,563 accounts. We have a 67% participation rate, and from our opt-actions, we've had 1.6% of people opt in, 0.4% opt up, and 0.1% opt down, and 3% just opt out. Our local option, which is the Nashua Community Benefit Rate, has a 97.9% participation from our original pool of customers. 1.5% of people choose to opt down to Granite Basic. 0.1% choose to opt up to Granite Plus, which is 30% renewable energy. 0.2 to Clean 50, which is 50%, and 0.2 to 100% renewable energy. I just wanted to get those numbers out there because we're really proud of them, but I swear I have a point. So joint reserves for Nashua Community Power through the Community Power Coalition is accumulated on behalf of all members of the coalition. The objective of these funds, which is that $5.4 million I showed you earlier, is to maintain financial reserves for the organization, rate stability against upward movement in rates, to ensure sufficient cash availability to meet expenses, to lower and avoid interest expenses, build creditworthiness, all that really good stuff that you want for a community or a company that exists. Now, discretionary reserves is something that I think we should be talking more about when it comes to creative financing. So individual members may apply an adder, which Nashua did, which is the 0.2 of a cent per kilowatt hour to their community power rate for the accrual of discretionary reserves. Applications of such adders must be approved by the Community Power Coalition CEO and the members' governing body, which we clearly have since we move forward with the project. Discretionary reserves shall be tracked and accounted for and transferred to the individual member community and otherwise applied and held by CPC and HI's directed by the individual members' governing body. Members may use discretionary reserves to invest in developing new local energy projects or to fund programs benefiting their customers specifically or for other uses as determined solely by each individual member. And that seems very vast, like it seems very vague, right, as to what you can use this money for, which makes it a really interesting and creative way to finance projects. So Nashua added the adder, and this is our original list of potential projects that we dreamed up. So we would love to use our adder money, which has accumulated $30,000 in just 1 month, which could accumulate up to, we predicted, $400,000 to $420,000 in financing or just funds that we can use to help our ratepayers in our community. So one thing we can invest in is high-speed level EV chargers, a revolving loan fund for residential and home rental upgrades, financial support for solarization programs, rebate programs for residential energy efficiency projects, to purchase power purchase arrays, like our Lake Street Fire Department and Transit Garage, all have solar on top of them that are in a PPA. We could use some of this money to buy out them at the end of their or at the end of the contract period we have with our solar owner. We could launch a residential and commercial energy coaching program. We could create incentives to encourage the development of renewable energy systems and high-performing buildings by updating land use codes to permit density bonuses or similar incentives. The city owns electric and alternative fuel vehicle purchases, HVAC and energy efficiency upgrades for city buildings, and we can invest in our DPW landfill gas to energy microgrid line purchases in the future. So that's a lot of projects. We're starting to narrow these things down. Here we go. So we were thinking what will create the max impact for ratepayers and encourage them to want to stay in the program. So we are proposing or thinking about additional rebates to the New Hampshire Saves program for heat pumps and weatherizations. And we've ruled this out in our aggregation committee since I created this presentation, but we were also thinking about incentives for electric bikes and renter-friendly weatherization kit giveaways. So who can access these incentives? One thing that we need to figure out is if we would allow the Nashua Community Benefit Rate participants, that's that 97% participation rate, to have first bid or first dibs on this money. If there'll be some sort of an income qualifier, that's something that we'll have to figure out as we create this program. And how will we evaluate applications? We're still working on that. And project timeframe, this is an aggressive plan, but we are hoping to announce potential programs for with the new spring rates in December or January of 2020. What year are we in? 2024 and 2025. We're hoping to start our RFP and our RFI processes in February and March of next year, and we're hoping to announce our complete program in April for Earth Month. So that's something to look at from the city of Nashua in the next year or next 6 months, I guess. We've done a little bit of research. We've reached out to Clean Energy New Hampshire, who has facilitated a ton of conversations for us with our utilities and has expressed helping us with logistical planning. We've reached out to Eversource, and they're willing to advertise any additional rebates we might add from the National Community Benefit Rate Fund. And we've reached out to Upper Valley Bike Rebate Program, who are currently giving incentives out for people to buy electric bikes. And who we need to reach out to are Liberty Utilities and the New Hampshire Department of Energy. So our research has found that the average cost of a heat pump for a home can be between $7,000 and $36,000. The federal rebate, we think, is about $2,000. New Hampshire Saves is offering between $250 to $6,250, depending on the type of project. If you're replacing a resistance system, some speculations there. We think that we can add an additional rebate there to make that $36,000 or $7,000 a little bit more palatable, in addition to either a $2,000 and a $6,250 rebate from the state and the feds. For weatherization, New Hampshire Saves covers 50% of weatherization costs up to $6,000. Nashua had about 137 weatherizations projects through New Hampshire Saves, an additional 300 projects through the income-eligible HEA program. And the average copay for these programs was $2,300. We think that we can put some money in from our adder to that $2,300 to make it easier for people to weatherize their homes, and also add maybe some funds towards people being able to do the electric. Wow. I'm talking a lot. Thank you, Levent. Levent works with me. The electric audit that you have to do before you can move forward in the New Hampshire Saves program. For e-bikes, we've scratched that, so I'm not going to get into that any further. And that's our spiel.
I have a quick question. Is there anything? Thank you. Is there anything dictating how quickly you need to spend that money?
No.
And is there anything protecting that money from being absorbed into a different part of the town budget?
So I think it's about what you set up as a town or a city or a county to hold that money. So Nashua has chosen to do a trust fund, and that fund will accept that money every year in our fiscal year budget. And it shouldn't be absorbed into the annual budget at the end of the year when we do fiscal year planning. So that money should be able to stay and accumulate.
Good. Thank you.
Hi. So I'm kind of the amateur here. I serve on the Select Board and the Energy Committee in Dublin, was involved in starting the Energy Committee. This is a chronology, but I'm going to try to touch on the high points, which do overlap with some of the topics already discussed. We have 4 people in our committee. We're all original members. We lost a few through somebody passing away and somebody else being too busy. But keep trying to recruit more. So we're 4 strong and mighty, and we continue to focus on education. That's been a theme all the way from the beginning when we first started meeting a little over 2.5 years ago. We are now part of Cheshire Community Power, so that means that we joined a county plan. We didn't have to develop our own individual Dublin plan. Some of our, I like to say, our high-achieving neighbors like Peterborough and Harrisville have their own community power plan, but we were able to join the Cheshire. It's called Cheshire Community Power, and it was a sort of multi-step process to do that. First, we had some public meetings where Terry Clark, one of the commissioners, came and presented both to our committee, and of course all of our meetings are public, but then do an additional advertised public meeting. We sent a survey out. Didn't get a huge response, but it was sort of all part of that, making people more aware that this is a relevant topic. And then we had a town meeting warrant article in March of 2023, in which we got a vote showing community support. Now with community joining a county plan, that's actually by RSA, that's a select board or city council vote. If a city or town has its own plan, that would be a different process. In the case of a small town like Dublin, that would actually be a town meeting vote to approve your own plan. But in our case, it was going to be a select board vote, but we wanted to make sure we put it before town meeting first and really talked about what it meant, take questions, and gauge community support. So then the vote on that was later that August. We've this isn't one thing we've done, and I'm sure many of you have done this if you're involved in small town government, but we've had panel discussions, and one was on local residents sharing their experiences with roof and ground solar arrays, and that was really great because even with 8 different residents, it's 8 different experiences, how people sourced their panels, decided between ground and roof, and then we made the recordings. They're still available at our town library. So in August of 2023, Nelson, Dublin, and Fitzwilliam, for the first wave with Cheshire County, it was the 3 towns plus Cheshire County, and then since then, I don't know, about 6, 7, 8 more towns in Cheshire County have joined Cheshire Community Power. And we've had a couple of governance committee meetings that are each one's getting bigger because more towns are joining. But we also voted in June of 2024, the governance committee, by unanimous vote to approve a discretionary reserve adder like what Nashua did. So ours is called Community Basic, and it's a 0.3 cent increase, just the way Nashua is doing, only theirs is their city plan and ours as part of the county plan. So what happens with the reserves is we have an allocated portion that's for Dublin, and the estimate annual reserve for Dublin with this 0.3% adder reserve as presented in June, the estimate is about $15,000 a year. And if you had a bigger reserve adder, like 0.5 cents, obviously that would be more. But still, that puts us in the position that Nashua is now in of gradually building up funds, and raises the question what you're going to do with it, which circles back to why we joined Cheshire Community Power. We're a small town, and our select board is very leery about taking on more administrative responsibilities. We have a hard time getting volunteers and doing research and making sure we're really doing right by people and doing right by people's money in particular. So, now that we have a question of managing reserve account, that's a conversation. It's just starting to build, so it's not urgent, but it's going to become more and more urgent to talk about that. So we also started looking into, looked at town sites for a possible solar array, and identified in the fall of 2023, identified our fire station roof, a portion of it, which faces south. It's right on 101 if you've ever been through Dublin, right next to Yankee Magazine, and there's a south-facing portion. So when we were, and there was in the air a year ago was that New Hampshire Department of Energy was possibly going to be offering a municipal solar grant opportunity for small solar arrays. And the talk a year ago was that it might include a town match. So we thought that was a really exciting opportunity for us, but how would we come up with the money for the town match? So a select board, energy committee proposed to the select board, and we, select board supported a warrant article to create an energy capital reserve account, which is also something that I heard about last year at this meeting, this idea of energy capital reserve accounts. Other towns may already have been doing them, but I feel like we're always a little bit in catch-up mode in Dublin, but we're learning as we go along. So that was approved at town meeting in March of 2024 with initial funding of $15,000. Then fast forward to June, New Hampshire Department of Energy did open up a grant application opportunity with an August 1st deadline. It turned out there would not be a town match required. However, some costs would need to be covered by the communities, both permitting and then going forward, things that wouldn't be covered by a warranty like maintenance. So we met that deadline. We submitted an application. It was for projects up to 60 kW. Ours is less than half of that, our proposed project. And the fact that we had taken this to town meeting in March and had created an energy capital reserve, we felt really showed support in our community for this proposal, because we talked about this possibility at town meeting, but also for the fact that we would have funds to cover costs should we get the grant. We're also looking at a capped landfill in town and we've had conversations with Southwest Regional Planning Commission, and I should mention too how helpful our Clean Energy New Hampshire circuit rider, first John Condos and now Frank Richter, have been fantastic all the way along from when we first started this committee. So they've been huge in helping us every step, and Frank was a big help last summer when we were working on this grant application, and he gave us a lot of, names of possible companies. We put it in an RFP, and we got 4 bidders, and Frank helped us. We put out the RFP, but you still want to reach out to people individually or organizations to make sure that they're aware of your RFP, and that was just one of the many ways that Frank helped us. So, but going back to the to landfill, Southwest Regional Planning Commission is involved in helping to administer the process with EPA Brownfields assessment grants. So we talk about, it's important on this site, community engagement, engaging with the Conservation Commission, and then how do we figure out, develop enough of an engineering understanding, and hope perhaps an assessment grant could help us with that, so that we could begin the conversation with possible developers, if that makes sense. So, thank you.
I have a quick question for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You mentioned that you joined the Cheshire Community Power Coalition. What's the process for joining the Regional Community Power Coalition?
It's not a coalition. So Cheshire Community Power does purchase energy supply, electricity supply, through the Community Power Coalition. So that's where, there's the option with community power for individual cities and towns, and also for counties. And Cheshire County was the first county to take advantage of that. And we were talking earlier, one of the Cheshire County commissioners was involved early on with the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. So that's what we're part of. We don't have an individual community power plan as a town. We are part of Cheshire Community Power, which means that is the default electricity service provider for Dublin residents, businesses, and the town, unless if you're with a third-party supplier, when the plan goes into effect, that you need to get out of your third-party contract and opt into the county plan, same as in the towns, cities and towns with individual plans too. But if you're already with Eversource, when the plan goes into effect, then it becomes the default service provider. And one of the ways we were able to sell this to the town was to explain to people that they can always opt out. You can opt out both of a community power plan and out of a particular rate if you don't like the rate. So you have freedom to go back to Eversource at any time, or whatever your default provider is. There's others, obviously, in New Hampshire than Eversource.
That's amazing. And because they didn't exist when I was on my local energy committee, how did you connect with the circuit riders?
We first spoke to, Mary Bruner, who was a city planner in Keene. Doria Drockman with the Monadic Sustainability Hub came out, and we got the name of Henry Herndon. And then they told us about the circuit, Clean Energy New Hampshire, and the circuit, some combination of them. This was in the spring of 2022, so not that long ago, but for us it was early in our process. And people were talking about Clean Energy New Hampshire and that they had the circuit rider and really how great resource it is.
That's wonderful. We have plenty of time for questions from the audience. Is there anyone with a burning question on their mind? Go ahead.
I'm curious whether the state is actually moving towards electric vehicles. Obviously, the state owns a lot of electric vehicles, and they can present clear savings over time.
Is this on? Yeah. That's a great question. So there's going right down to, the basic level. I think there's even disagreement about what group is kind of in charge of whether we buy electric vehicles. Is it our procurement organization who deals with what we purchase and how much we pay and who we buy it from? Is it our facilities group, my group, who would be in charge of installing probably the infrastructure? Is it the individual agencies who are purchasing those vehicles for their fleet? So we haven't even answered that question internally yet. I know that there are some agencies, DES as an example, that's more progressive. They have electric vehicles in their fleet. They have charging. We started putting in charging stations a few years ago, and the legislature has kind of pulled back their thoughts on, should we be doing this in state facilities? How many do we need? Are we over installing based on the number of vehicles that are around? And so I feel like we've had this start and stop with EVs, right? Like we get some momentum and then it's a step back. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but that's kind of where we're at.
So the adder is our default rate. So everybody is automatically enrolled in the adder rate. So that's how we get people to participate in it. They do have the option to opt down to Granite Basic, which is the 8.6 cents a kilowatt hour and doesn't include the adder. So I think the way that we've been able to get so much participation is by making it our default supply rate.
So the question's about community engagement and community buy-in. And actually, yes, we've been giving that a lot of thought. Our landfill is on for Dublin, a large piece of town-owned property that includes our highway barn, our current transfer station behind that's the landfill. There's also three-phase power lines running right through between the transfer station and the highway barn, and we're told there's unused capacity on those three-phase power lines, which help to make it an attractive site. However, on the other side of Cobb Meadow Road, there are residences, and then beyond further, there's Boulder Drive, there's residences, and there's also possibly wildlife corridor. We've gotten some mapping and analysis from Southwest Regional Planning Commission. Wetlands, wildlife corridor, and residences are three among potential other concerns. And so we're taking it slowly, and we have a site visit later this month with the Conservation Commission, and we already know we want to site anything. If anything should be sited, it would need to be far away as possible from the residences, not visible, and not have a negative impact on wildlife corridor or wetlands. And it's one step at a time. Yeah, I'm sorry, to hear that Stratum, obviously you do all this work and then it can get harder rather than easier.
Since Nashua is also a community, I'd love to talk about community buy-in and moving things forward. For community power, we had to have multiple public hearing sessions in order to launch a program, and that's one of the rules, that you have to do that in order to launch a community power program no matter where you are in the state. One thing that I think helps to make people not want to get in the way of that type of progress is offering them a benefit in savings. So Nashua Community Power has saved the community $5.6 million. That makes people want to keep the programming. So if you can educate people and convey that savings will exist, and then prove that is correct when you launch the program and share that information, it's going to make people excited about your programming. So now that we're launching, I think the adder, and we'll have this additional rebates and stuff coming from Nashua Community Power. We've established trust with our residents. People are excited to see what's coming next, and we're still offering them savings. So Nashua Community Power's rate is 8.8 cents a kilowatt hour. I think the utility rate, 10.2 cents a kilowatt hour. We're offering them savings now and rebates and programs. So I think that when your work speaks for itself and is truly benefiting ratepayers and the residents, they're just going to want to go for it.
And I would add too, we've talked to one possible developer about the transfer station site, and he's only because he's been seeking us out, but he is applying for some sort of funding for up to 1 megawatt where you can have a low and moderate income benefit. So if we could develop something at the transfer station on the Cap landfill area that could benefit people in the area with an income qualification, they might not be the exclusive beneficiaries, but that kind of thing would help. Again, though, we're still trying to figure this out.